She was not careless with her heart. That is the first thing you must understand about Clara. If you are looking for a story about a foolish girl who left the door unlocked for a monster, this isn't it. She didn't leave the door unlocked. She had deadbolts. She had steel-reinforced frames. She had emotional alarms set so sensitively that a stiff breeze of insincerity would set them off. It wasn't because she had never loved before. No. It was because she had loved too much, and she had learned exactly what love could take from a person. She believed trust was something earned slowly. Painfully slowly. Like growing an oak tree in winter. It required time. It required consistency. It required actions that stayed the same even when no one was watching. Her name didn't matter as much as her method. What mattered was that she was careful. Careful with words, because words are contracts. Careful with promises, because broken promises leave shrapnel. Careful with people, because people are variables in an equation she needed to be constant. She had watched too many good intentions end badly. She had seen how easily kindness could be mistaken for weakness, and how quickly trust, once broken, could change a person's chemical makeup forever. So, she built a life that didn't require anyone else to hold it up. She was the architect, the builder, and the security guard of her own existence. And inside those walls, it was quiet. It was lonely, yes. But it was safe. Clara's apartment was the physical manifestation of this philosophy. Perched on the 20th floor of a high-rise, it overlooked the sprawling, glittering grid of the city, detached and observant. Inside, everything was white, slate gray, and natural wood. There was no clutter. No stray magazines, no unwashed cups, no evidence of a chaotic life. It was beautiful, but it felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit, a space curated to prevent unexpected collisions. On a Tuesday night, Clara stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. She was dressed in comfortable but expensive loungewear, the fabric soft against skin that rarely felt the touch of another person. She held a glass of red wine by the stem, her grip loose but controlled. She wasn't drinking it yet, she was just inspecting the way the city lights refracted through the crimson liquid, distorting the world outside. She turned and walked to her kitchen island. On the counter sat a single plate and a single fork. The meal was prepared with chef-like precision: grilled salmon, asparagus, wild rice. She sat down. She ate in silence. There was no television on to fill the void. No music. Just the low, steady hum of the refrigerator and the distant, muffled sound of traffic 20 stories below. Her phone sat perfectly parallel to the edge of the placemat. The screen lit up with a notification: work email, site inspection delayed. Then another: Mom, call me when you can. Clara swiped the notifications away without opening them. She exhales, a long, controlled breath that pushed the day out of her lungs. She picked up the wine glass, took a calculated sip, and closed her eyes. This was her kingdom. Static. Controlled. Empty. The next morning, the city streets were a battlefield. The morning commute was a sensory assault of blaring horns, pushing bodies, and steam rising from subway grates. Clara moved through the crowd like a shark cutting through water. She wore a tailored camel coat, headphones over her ears playing classical music with no lyrics to distract her, and dark sunglasses. She carried a leather portfolio like a shield. She dodged a man spilling coffee without breaking her stride. She sidestepped a tourist stopping abruptly to look at a map. She was hyper-aware of her surroundings. This was her armor. She didn't look at faces, she looked at gaps in the crowd where she could fit without touching anyone. When she arrived at the architectural firm, the atmosphere shifted from physical chaos to professional noise. It was an open-plan office, a nightmare of collaboration and chatter. But Clara's office was glass-walled and pristine. She was a senior restoration architect, a job that required her to look at broken things and figure out how to save them without destroying their history. Her desk was covered in blueprints for the old bank trust building, a massive project that was currently giving her a migraine. A burly contractor named Jim stood in her doorway, looking impatient. "I don't care if the marble is cheaper, Jim," Clara said, her voice sharp but not loud. It's the wrong grain. The original 1920s facade used Carrara, not synthetic composite. If we use the composite, it yellows in 3 years. Nobody is going to notice the grain, Clara, Jim argued, leaning against the doorframe. You're blowing the budget over rocks. Clara looked up, her gaze withering. I will notice. And the client pays me to notice. If you can't source the Carrara, I'll find a vendor who can. Do you want to make the call, or should I? Jim huffed, rolling his eyes, but he backed down. He knew better than to fight her on details. Fine. I'll call the Italians. But it's going to take 6 weeks. Then we wait 6 weeks, Clara replied instantly. As Jim left, Clara dropped her head into her hands for a split second, rubbing her temples. The tension in her shoulders was a physical weight. She reached for her coffee mug, needing a lifeline, but it was empty. She stood up, composing herself, smoothing her coat, and walked toward the break room. The break room was empty, which was a small mercy, but the coffee pot was also empty, which was a tragedy. Clara sighed, a sound of genuine frustration. She started the process of brewing a new pot, her movements aggressive. She grabbed a filter, shoved it into the basket, and tried to jam it into the machine. It stuck. She tugged it. It was jammed. The machine is temperamental, a voice said from behind her. Clara stiffened. She didn't like being watched, and she liked unsolicited advice even less. She turned. A man was standing by the refrigerator. This was Elias. He wasn't classically handsome in a movie star way, but he was striking. He had a stillness to him that contrasted with the frantic energy of the office. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked like they actually did work. He was watching her struggle with the coffee filter with a look of mild amusement. You have to angle the filter basket to the left, he said softly. Or it jams. I've worked here for 5 years, Clara said, her guard instantly up. I think I know how to work the coffee maker. She turned back and jammed the basket harder. It didn't budge. Elias didn't laugh. He didn't say I told you so. He just stepped forward, gently. May I? Clara hesitated. Every instinct in her said to say no, to muscle through it herself. But she was tired. So she stepped back, crossing her arms defensively. Elias reached out. He didn't force the machine. He wiggled it slightly to the left, heard a soft click, and slid it in effortlessly. He pressed the brew button. The machine gurgled to life, the smell of coffee filling the tense air. He turned to her. His eyes were dark, warm, and completely unthreatening. I'm Elias, he said. From logistics. I started 2 weeks ago. Clara, she replied shortly. Restoration. I know, Elias said. I've seen your renderings for the bank trust building. The detail work on the cornices is obsessive. In a good way. Clara blinked. She was used to being called rigid or difficult or uptight. Obsessive in a good way was new. Detail is the only thing that keeps the building standing, she said automatically. Elias nodded slowly, as if he was really thinking about her words. I agree. If the foundation has cracks, it doesn't matter how pretty the paint is. It's nice to meet someone who cares about the bones of a thing. He smiled then. It was a small smile. It didn't reach for anything. It didn't ask for her number or her attention. He just grabbed his water bottle and walked out. Clara stood there, listening to the coffee drip. She realized, for the first time in hours, that she was holding her breath. She exhales. So when he first entered her life, she didn't rush. Why would she? She was a fortress, and fortresses do not lower their drawbridges for strangers. But he wasn't dramatic. He didn't try to impress her with loud gestures or big claims of immediate affection. He didn't try to dazzle her. He was steady. That was what made him different from the others. The others had been storms, passionate, violent, exciting, and destructive. Elias was the weather forecast. Predictable. Calm. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered small details that others forgot. He checked in without being asked, and he asked without demanding an answer. Weeks passed. It wasn't an explosion, it was an erosion. One afternoon, Clara was eating a salad at a small table in the lunch area, reading a book. She used reading as a do not disturb sign. Elias walked by. He paused, not hovering, just noticing. Is that the new biography on Zaha Hadid? He asked. Clara looked up, marking her page with a finger. It is. It's dense. Elias chuckled. Like her buildings. Brilliant, but heavy. Do you mind if I sit? I have 5 minutes before a conference call. If you want to read, I'll just drink my coffee in silence. Clara gestured to the chair. Usually, she would say she was busy. Today, she nodded. Saturday, you looked stressed in the hallway earlier, he said. The marble issue. Clara looked at him, surprised. You heard about that? I pay attention, he said simply. Plus, Jim the contractor has a voice that carries through drywall. He's trying to cut corners. He's trying to ruin the integrity of the project to save a few $1,000s, Clara vented, surprising herself. It's insulting. It's not just insulting, Elias said, looking her dead in the eye. It's short-sighted. You're building for 50 years from now. He's building for his bonus next month. You're right to hold the line, Clara. Don't let him bully you. Clara felt a strange warmth in her chest. It was validation. It was the feeling of someone standing next to her, looking at the same problem, and seeing it the same way. Most people think I'm being difficult, she admitted quietly. Elias leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. Most people mistake standards for difficulty. I don't think you're difficult. I think you're the only one here who actually gives a damn. He checked his watch, stood up, and smiled. That's my time. Enjoy the book. He left. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't linger. And that absence of pressure made her curious. That night, in her apartment, Clara lay in bed while rain hammered against the glass. She opened the company directory on her phone. She found Elias Thorne, logistics manager. She stared at the number. She didn't call. She just saved it. A week later, Clara was sick. It was a terrible flu that knocked her flat. She was wrapped in blankets on her couch, shivering, surrounded by tissues. Her apartment, usually pristine, was slightly messy. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Elias. They had never texted before. So you weren't at the Friday wrap-up meeting. Everything okay? Clara stared at the screen. She felt incredibly lonely. The silence of the apartment was usually her friend, but tonight, with a fever burning her skin, it felt oppressive. She typed, caught the flu. Dying on my couch. He replied instantly, do you need anything? Clara typed, no, I'm fine. Just resting. She put the phone down. She hated asking for help. It felt like surrender. 2 hours later, the buzzer rang. Clara groaned, wrapped her robe tighter, and shuffled to the intercom. Yes, she rasped. Delivery for Clara, a voice said. She buzzed him up. When she opened the door, a delivery man handed her a brown paper bag. Already paid for, miss. Clara took the bag to the kitchen. Inside were 3 containers of high-end soup, pho, chicken noodle, and a spicy vegetable broth. There was a box of herbal tea, throat lozenges, and a magazine about interior design. There was a note. I didn't know what kind of soup you liked, so I got the trifecta. Hydrate. The bank building needs its guardian back. Clara stood in her kitchen, holding the note. Her eyes welled up with tears. It was such a small thing. Soup. But it was the fact that he didn't push. He didn't ask to come up. He didn't demand a thank you. He just provided. She opened the pho. The steam rose, smelling of star anise and comfort. She took a sip. It tasted like safety. And slowly, without realizing it, she felt something unfamiliar. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she could exhale. He didn't push his way into her life. He blended into it. Like watercolor paint on a wet canvas, he just seeped into the empty spaces she hadn't realized were there. Morning messages. Simple conversations. A presence that didn't demand, it waited. When she hesitated, he reassured her. When she doubted, he was patient. And patience is dangerous when you're guarded. Because patience feels like respect. She told herself she was just being friendly. Just cautious optimism. But trust doesn't announce itself when it arrives. It sneaks in quietly and settles where fear used to live. There were moments, small ones, when something felt off. A question avoided. A story that didn't quite align. A detail that changed slightly when repeated. But nothing serious. Nothing worth confronting. After all, everyone has imperfections. And trust has a way of explaining away what doubt tries to warn us about. When he spoke about the future, his voice softened. When he spoke about loyalty, he meant it. At least, it sounded like he did. She began sharing pieces of herself she had kept hidden. Her fears. Her past mistakes. Her dreams that still scared her to say out loud. And each time, he listened. Never judging. Never dismissing. That was when she made the mistake she would later replay in her mind 1,000 times. She believed that someone who listens deeply must care deeply too. It started small. A favor. Then another. Nothing alarming. Nothing reckless. Just help. And when you trust someone, helping them doesn't feel like a risk. It feels like loyalty. She didn't notice the shift at first, how reliance was replacing independence. How comfort was slowly becoming dependence. Trust rarely breaks you all at once. It weakens you gently, until you don't recognize how much you've handed over. By the time she realized how much space he occupied in her life, he was already everywhere. In her decisions. Her routines. Her silence. The anchor dropped on a Tuesday night, late. It was 9 p.m. The office was dark except for Clara's lamp. She was frantic. Her desk was covered in papers, her hair was a mess, and her breathing was shallow. She was on the phone with IT support, her voice trembling. What do you mean the file is corrupted? The presentation is tomorrow at 8 a.m. I cannot present without the rendering files. She hung up, slamming the phone down. She put her head in her hands. This was a disaster. If she blew this presentation, the partners would rethink her lead on the project. She had worked on this for 6 months. It was gone. Elias appeared in the doorway. He was wearing his coat, ready to leave, but he stopped when he saw her posture. You look like you're about to set the building on fire, he said calmly. Clara looked up, desperation written all over her face. The server crashed. My local backup is corrupted. I've lost the 3D walkthrough for the client meeting tomorrow. I'm dead. I'm actually dead. Elias stepped into the room. He didn't look panicked. He looked unnervingly calm. Okay. Breathe. When was the last time it synced to the cloud? I don't know. Noon? I've done 6 hours of work since then. Move, he said gently. Clara stood up. Elias sat in her chair. He cracked his knuckles. He didn't look like a logistics manager right now, he looked like a technician. I used to work in IT before I switched to ops, he explained, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Let me look at the shadow copies. Clara stood behind him, biting her nails. She watched him open the command prompt. Lines of code scrolled by, reflecting in his eyes. Elias, it's gone. I know it is, she whispered. Nothing is ever really gone, Clara, he murmured, not looking away from the screen. It's just hidden. You just have to know where to look. He typed for 5 minutes. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Clara was pacing the small length of her office. Got it, he said. Clara froze. What? He pointed to the screen. The main file was toast, but the cache folder had a temp save from 8:45 p.m. It's all here. He hit restore. The 3D model popped up on the screen, perfect, glowing, saved. Clara let out a sob. A literal sob of relief. She impulsively hugged him from behind, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You are a magician. You saved my life. Again." Elias froze for a second, then his hand came up to touch her arm. Gently. "I didn't do much. I just recovered what was already there." Clara pulled back, realizing the intimacy of the contact. She was flushed, her heart racing. I owe you," she stammered. "Big time. Dinner? Drinks? Anything." Elias spun the chair around to face her. He looked at her with an intensity she hasn't seen before. "Dinner," he said. "But not as payment. Just dinner. Because I want to spend time with you when you aren't hyperventilating." Clara looked at him. The no was on the tip of her tongue, the reflex to stay safe, to stay alone, to retreat to her glass fortress. But she looked at the screen where her work was saved. She looked at his hands, steady on the armrests. She felt safe. "Okay," she said. "Dinner." An hour later, they were in a quiet booth at a restaurant down the street. They had finished eating. A bottle of wine sat between them, half empty. Clara was laughing. She rarely laughed. "And then he said the gargoyles looked too sad," she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "Can you believe that? They're gargoyles. They're supposed to ward off evil spirits, not look like they're greeting you at Disney World." Elias smiled, swirling his wine. People want the aesthetic of history without the weight of it. They want the castle, but they don't want the drafty halls. Clara stopped laughing. She looked at him. "Exactly. You get it. You really get it." The laughter faded into a comfortable silence. The restaurant noise buzzed around them, but their booth felt like a private island. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "For tonight. For the file. For listening. I'm not usually this open." Elias supplied. "Trusting," she corrected. Elias reached across the table. He took her hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm but not controlling. "Trust is heavy, Clara," he said, his voice low. "You've been carrying it all yourself for a long time. It's okay to put it down for a second. I've got you." Clara looked at their joined hands. She didn't pull away. "I've got you." 3 words. Simple. Monosyllabic. But in that moment, they sounded like a prayer. She didn't see the cage forming. She only saw the shelter. She didn't see that by handing him her trust, she was handing him the blueprints to her destruction. She just saw a hand reaching out in the dark. And God help her, she took it. The most dangerous thing about a cage is not the bars. It is the comfort. If a cage is warm enough, if the food is good enough, and if the company is charming enough, you will eventually forget to check if the door is locked. You might even lock it yourself, just to keep the cold out. For Clara, the months following that dinner were not dramatic. There were no fireworks, no shouting matches, no grand declarations of ownership. There was only a slow, steady settling. It was the feeling of sinking into a warm bath, soothing, enveloping, and utterly immobilizing. She told herself she was happy. And why wouldn't she be? Elias was everything the chaos of her past was not. He was the calm in the center of her storm. When she came home from the site, dusty and frustrated with contractors who couldn't read a load-bearing schematic, he was there. Not just physically present, but mentally attuned. He would have a glass of wine waiting, the exact vintage she liked, poured to the exact level. He would listen to her vent about the limestone porosity or the union disputes, and he wouldn't just nod, he would engage. He offered solutions. He offered perspective. He became her editor. That was the first shift, though she didn't call it that at the time. She called it support. She called it having a partner. But an editor does more than fix spelling mistakes. An editor decides what stays in the story and what gets cut. It began with opinions. Harmless ones. Subjective observations that felt like protective insights. It started with Maya. Maya had been Clara's best friend since architecture school. Maya was loud, messy, vibrant, and chronically late. She was the splash of paint on Clara's white canvas. They had a standing dinner date every Thursday, Thai food and cheap beer, complaining about men and work. It was a ritual. It was a tether to who Clara was before the suits and the contracts. 3 months into the relationship, Elias joined them for the first time. The dinner was fine. It was pleasant. Maya was her usual self, telling boisterous stories, spilling a little sauce on the tablecloth, making jokes that walked the line of appropriate. Elias smiled. He laughed at the right moments. He paid the bill before Maya could even reach for her purse. On the car ride home, the city lights blurred past the window, streaking the night with gold and red. Clara felt content. Her two worlds had collided, and nobody had died. "She's intense," Elias said softly, keeping his eyes on the road. Clara laughed. "Oh, that's Maya. She's a hurricane. You get used to the wind speed." "She's funny," Elias conceded. He paused, tapping his finger rhythmically on the steering wheel. "Does she always talk down to you like that?" Clara turned in her seat, frowning slightly. "What? She didn't talk down to me." "No? Maybe I misread it," Elias said, his tone breezy, unbothered. "It just seemed like every time you talked about the cathedral project, she made a joke about you being a brick whisperer." It felt a little diminutive. Like she was trying to remind you that she thinks your work is boring compared to her landscape design. Clara felt a prickle of defense. That's just her humor. She calls herself a dirt stylist. We poke fun at each other. "Of course," Elias said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. It's just, you're the lead architect on a historic restoration. That's a massive achievement, Clara. I just think you deserve friends who celebrate that, rather than turn it into a punchline." He left it there. He didn't demand she stop seeing Maya. He didn't call Maya a bad person. He just planted a seed. And seeds, when watered with insecurity, grow roots. The next Thursday, Clara went to dinner with Maya alone. But this time, she wasn't just present. She was observing. She was watching the interaction through the lens Elias had handed her. When Maya made a joke about Clara's obsession with grout lines, Clara didn't laugh. She felt a sting. Was Maya mocking her? Was this actually a subtle dig at her rigidity? When Maya interrupted her story to point out a hot waiter, Clara felt annoyed. "She doesn't respect my time," she thought. "She doesn't listen." Clara came home early that night. Elias was on the couch, reading. He looked up, his face an open map of concern. "Back so soon?" "I have a headache," Clara lied. She dropped her keys in the bowl. "You were right. She is exhausting." Elias didn't gloat. He didn't say "I told you so." He just stood up, walked over, and wrapped her in a hug that felt like a shield. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I know you have history with her. But people grow apart, Clara. You're soaring right now. Not everyone can handle the altitude." And just like that, the tether to Maya frayed. It wasn't cut. It just thinned. Clara stopped answering Maya's texts immediately. She cancelled a few Thursdays. She told herself she was busy. She told herself she was evolving. She didn't realize she was being pruned. The isolation didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like focus. With Maya's chaotic energy removed, Clara's world became quieter, streamlined around the axis of Elias. He was the sun, and she was the planet caught in his gravity, happy to be held in orbit. He began helping her make decisions. It started with the small things: what to wear to a client meeting, how to phrase an email to a difficult vendor. "I wouldn't wear the gray suit," he would say, leaning against the doorframe as she dressed. "It washes you out. Wear the navy one. It makes you look authoritative. You want them to respect you, not pity you." Clara would look in the mirror. She had always liked the gray suit. But now, looking at her reflection, She saw what he saw. She looked pale. She looked tired. She changed into the navy suit. "Perfect," he said, kissing her cheek. "Now you look like a director." She walked into that meeting feeling powerful. She crushed it. And when she came home, she credited him. "He sees me better than I see myself," she thought. That was the trap. When someone praises you for qualities you struggle to maintain, you lean in. You listen. He told her she deserved stability. That life had been unfair to her. That people often took advantage of her good heart. She agreed, because she had lived that truth. What she didn't see, or didn't want to see, was how carefully his words were chosen. How often his comfort came wrapped in subtle suggestions. It moved from clothes to career. There was a vacancy for a partnership at the firm. It was between Clara and a colleague named David. David was talented, but disorganized. Clara was the obvious choice, but she hated the politics of campaigning for it. "I'm just going to let my work speak for itself," she told Elias over dinner. Elias put his fork down. The sound of the silver hitting the china was sharp. "Clara," he said, his voice dropping to that serious, protective register she had come to rely on. "That is incredibly naive. And I say that because I love you." Clara flinched. "Naive?" "David plays the game," Elias said. "He goes for drinks with the senior partners. He laughs at their bad jokes. If you stay silent, you will lose. And you will lose to someone who is half as talented as you are. Is that what you want?" "No. But I don't want to be a sycophant." "It's not sycophancy. It's strategy. You need to go in there tomorrow and demand it. You need to tell them that without you, the bank trust project fails. You need to make them afraid to lose you." "I can't do that. That's arrogance." "It's not arrogance if it's true." Elias leaned across the table. "Why are you so afraid of your own power? Why do you always try to make yourself smaller? Who taught you that?" The question hit her in the solar plexus. It dug up the old ghosts of her past relationships, the men who had told her she was too much, too loud, too rigid. "I'm not afraid," Clara whispered. "Then show them," Elias commanded softly. "Do it for us. We're building a future, Clara. You getting this partnership is part of the foundation. For us." The words were intoxicating. She wasn't just fighting for a title, she was fighting for them. For the unit. For the team. The next day, Clara walked into the senior partner's office. She didn't ask, she demanded. She laid out her value in cold, hard numbers. She hinted, subtly, as Elias had coached her, that headhunters were calling. She was ruthless. She got the promotion. When she told Elias that night, he didn't just congratulate her. He celebrated her. He bought champagne. He toasted to the Queen of the Skyline. "See," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "You just needed someone to give you permission to be great." She drank the champagne. It tasted like victory. She didn't notice the aftertaste, the slight metallic tang of the realization that she hadn't done it her way. She had done it his way. And his way had worked. Dependence rarely announces itself. It arrives disguised as success. The first real shift, the one that moved from emotional influence to tangible leverage, happened 4 months in. It was a quiet Tuesday. The kind of day where nothing bad is supposed to happen. Elias was quiet at dinner. He pushed his food around his plate. He checked his phone repeatedly. "Is everything okay?" Clara asked. "Fine," he said. But the word was clipped. Short. "Elias." He sighed, rubbing his face with his hands. He looked tired. He looked, and this terrified her, vulnerable. "It's embarrassing," he said. "You can tell me. Whatever it is." He looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "My accounts were frozen today." Clara blinked. "What? Why?" "Identity theft," he said, shaking his head with a bitter laugh. "Some hacker in Eastern Europe got into my primary checking and savings. The bank flagged it, which is good, but they've locked everything down while they investigate. It's going to take 10 days to clear. Oh my God, Clara said. That's awful. But it's fixable, right? The bank will refund you. Eventually. Yeah. But the timing it's a disaster. Why? He hesitated. He looked away, staring out the window. I have a payment due tomorrow on my mother's care facility. It's automatic. If it bounces, they charge a penalty, but worse, it stresses her out. She gets the letter, she panics, her heart condition. He trailed off. I can't let her worry. I just can't. He looked back at Clara. He didn't ask. He just looked defeated. I have cash in a safe deposit box, he muttered. But I can't get to it until the morning, and the transfer takes 24 hours. I'm going to miss the window by half a day. Clara's mind raced. She was the fortress. She was the one with the savings, the investments, the rainy day fund that could survive a monsoon. She had rules about money. Strict rules. Never lend to friends. Never lend to lovers. It was the quickest way to ruin a relationship. But looking at Elias, this man who had fixed her coffee maker, who had saved her presentation, who had empowered her to become a partner, the rules felt rigid. They felt cold. He wasn't some deadbeat asking for rent money. He was Elias. He was the most responsible person she knew. This was a glitch in the system, not a flaw in his character. How much is it? She asked. Elias flinched. No. Clara, no. I'm not asking you for money. That's not what this is. I'll figure it out. I'll call the facility and beg them to hold off. Elias, don't be ridiculous. You said yourself, you don't want your mom to panic. How much? He sighed, looking pained. It's $5,000. It's for the specialized memory care unit. $5,000. It wasn't a small amount. But for Clara, recently promoted, it was manageable. I'll transfer it, she said. I can do it right now from my app. Clara, I can't let you do that. We're partners, right? She used his word. The word he had planted. Partners help each other out of holes. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was tight. You are incredible, he said softly. I swear to you, the second the bank unlocks my accounts, 10 days, max, I will wire it back with interest. Don't be silly about interest. Just pay me back when you can. She picked up her phone. She opened her banking app. She entered his email address. She typed in 5000.00. Her thumb hovered over the send button. There was a voice in her head. A small, quiet voice that sounded like her mother. Don't do it. Money changes the dynamic. Once you open the vault, you can't close it. She looked up at Elias. He wasn't watching the phone. He was watching her face. He looked hopeful. He looked like he trusted her to save him. She pressed send. Transaction complete. Done, she said. Elias let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. Thank you. You don't know what this means. You saved me from a nightmare. He stood up, walked around the table, and kissed her. It was a deep, grateful kiss. Clara felt a surge of pride. She was the provider. She was the hero this time. She didn't notice that the balance of power had just shifted. She had just proven that her boundaries were negotiable. She had proven that if the story was sad enough, and the logic sound enough, the fortress would open its gates. 10 days passed. Clara didn't check her account. She didn't want to be that person who nags. She trusted him. On the 11th day, they were watching a movie. Elias was relaxed, laughing at the screen. Clara felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She hated talking about money. It felt dirty. But she had bills too. Hey, she said casually, during a commercial. Did the bank sort out the identity theft thing? Elias didn't flinch. He didn't tense up. He took a sip of his beer and nodded. Mostly. They unlocked the savings, but the checking is still under review. Bureaucracy, right? It's a nightmare. Oh, Clara said. So, the transfer. Elias turned to her. His face fell. He looked stricken. Oh my God. Clara. I completely forgot. With the investigation and the calls to the fraud department. I am so sorry. I can transfer it from the savings right now. Wait, no, I can't. The savings account isn't linked to Zelle. I have to go to the branch in the morning to authorize a wire. He looked so genuinely upset, so angry at himself. I am such an idiot, he said, running a hand through his hair. I promised you 10 days. I broke my promise. It's okay, Clara said quickly, soothing him. It's fine. Tomorrow is fine. I just wanted to check. It's not fine, he insisted. Integrity is everything. I failed you. He looked so broken up about it that Clara ended up comforting him. She ended up telling him it didn't matter, that money wasn't important, that she knew he was good for it. He went to the branch the next day. He sent her a screenshot of the confirmation receipt. Wire initiated, $5,000. Clara felt a wave of relief. See? He was honest. Her gut instinct to worry had been wrong. The voice of her mother had been wrong. The money didn't arrive the next day. Or the day after. Wires take 3 to 5 business days, Elias explained calmly. Especially with the fraud alert on the account. They flag everything outgoing. It made sense. It was logical. But the money didn't arrive in 5 days. On the 6th day, Elias came home looking furious. You are not going to believe this, he said, slamming his keys on the counter. The bank rejected the wire. Because the receiving account, your account, didn't match the address on file for the sender or something obscure like that. They're treating me like a criminal because I was hacked. He was the victim. He was the one suffering. Clara felt bad for bringing it up. It's okay, she said. We'll figure it out. I have cash, he said. I pulled it out. I'm just going to give you cash. I'm done with the banks. He walked into the bedroom and came back with a thick envelope. He tossed it on the table. Count it, he said. Please. I need you to know I'm serious. Clara looked at the envelope. It was thick. It was right there. I don't need to count it, Elias. Count it, he insisted. For my peace of mind. She opened the envelope. She counted. It was all there. 50 $100 bills. She felt a rush of shame for ever doubting him. He had gone to the bank, fought with them, and carried cash home just to make her whole. I'm sorry I nagged you, she said. You didn't nag, he said softly, pulling her into a hug. You were patient. More patient than I deserved. I promise, no more drama. Just us. Clara hugged him back. She felt the cash envelope pressing into her back where his hand held her. What she didn't realize, what she wouldn't realize for months, was that this was the test. He hadn't just borrowed money, he had tested her threshold for excuses. He had tested how many delays she would accept. He had tested if she would comfort him when he owed her. And she had passed with flying colors. The isolation deepened after that. Not because he forbade her from seeing people, but because explaining her life to anyone else felt exhausting. How could she explain to Maya that Elias was fighting a massive identity theft battle? Maya would ask too many questions. Maya would ask to see the police report. Maya would be cynical. How could she explain to her mother that she was paying for everything lately because Elias's assets were temporarily frozen? Her mother would call him a leech. They wouldn't understand. They didn't know him like she did. They didn't see the man who fixed the coffee maker, the man who believed in her genius, the man who brought her cash in an envelope just to keep his word. So she stopped talking about him. And then, she stopped talking to them. It was easier. It was quieter. It was just Clara and Elias. A closed circuit. A sealed room. He began to rewrite her history. One evening, they were looking at old photos on her laptop. A picture of her ex-boyfriend, Mark, popped up. He looks arrogant, Elias observed. He was okay, Clara said. We just wanted different things. He wanted kids. I wanted a career. Elias paused. He zoomed in on the photo. You know, he said thoughtfully. You told me once that he made you feel guilty for working late. That he used to call you cold. Yeah, sometimes. That's emotional abuse, Clara. Clara blinked. What? No. Mark wasn't abusive. He was just needy. Calling a woman cold because she has ambition is gaslighting, Elias said firmly. He was trying to make you question your sanity so you would become dependent on his validation. It's a classic control tactic. Clara stared at the photo of Mark. She had always remembered Mark as kind but incompatible. A sad breakup, but a decent one. But Elias sounded so certain. He used psychological terms. He analyzed the dynamic with the precision of a surgeon. I never thought about it like that, she said. Victims rarely do, Elias said sadly. That's why it works. He stripped away your confidence piece by piece. That's probably why you were so guarded when I met you. You were recovering from trauma you didn't even know you had. He looked at her with such pity, such tenderness. I'm so glad you're safe now, he whispered. Clara felt a chill, but she interpreted it as a revelation. Was Mark abusive? Was that why I felt so guilty all the time? She began to re-evaluate her entire past through Elias's narrative. Her parents weren't just strict, they were emotionally distant narcissists. Her professors weren't tough, they were misogynists. Her friends weren't fun, they were enablers who wanted to keep her stagnant. Everyone was a villain. Everyone except Elias. He was the only one who saw the truth. He was the only one who protected her. By the time the 6-month mark arrived, Clara wasn't just living with him, she was filtered through him. He moved in gradually. It wasn't a discussion. It was a logistical necessity. His lease was up, and with the bank freeze still causing residual issues with his credit check for a new place, it just made sense for him to stay with her for a few weeks. Just until the lawyers clear the fraud flag, he promised. Of course, she said. It's silly for you to pay rent somewhere else anyway. He brought one bag. Then two. Then his books. Then his coffee maker, because it was better than hers. He rearranged the furniture. The flow is better this way, he said, pushing her sofa against the other wall. It opens up the room. More light. Clara looked at the room. It looked different. It didn't look like her apartment anymore. But he was right. There was more light. You have an eye, she said. I just want you to be comfortable, he replied. He cooked dinner every night. He rubbed her feet when she came home. He listened to her stories. He was perfect. But there was a night, a small, quiet Tuesday night, when she woke up at 3 a.m. Elias was asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even. Clara got up to get a glass of water. She walked into the living room. The moonlight hit the coffee table. She saw his phone sitting there. It lit up with a notification. Text message, did you get the transfer? Rent is due on the 1st. The name on the text was landlord. Clara stared at it. Rent? Elias didn't have a landlord. He lived here. And his old lease was up. She reached for the phone. Her hand trembled. Then, she stopped. Trust is earned, she reminded herself. He is dealing with identity theft. This is probably some automated message from his old building, or maybe a storage unit he didn't mention. If she looked, she was the crazy one. If she looked, she was Mark, calling her cold. If she looked, she was destroying the only safe place she had ever known. She pulled her hand back. She didn't touch the phone. She went to the kitchen, drank her water, and went back to bed. She curled up next to Elias, fitting her body against his back. He grunted in his sleep and pulled her arm around his waist. She felt warm. She felt safe. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the image of the phone lighting up in the dark. A single, blinking eye in the fortress she had surrendered. She didn't know it yet, but the invasion was complete. The enemy wasn't at the gates. He was sleeping in her bed. And he had the keys to everything. The morning after Clara saw the text message from the landlord on Elias's phone, the sun rose with an aggressive brightness. It flooded the apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, dust motes Clara usually would have cleaned, but lately she had let slide. She sat at the kitchen island, clutching her coffee cup like a talisman. She hadn't slept. The image of the phone screen glowing in the dark had burned itself into her retinas. Rent is due. When Elias walked into the kitchen, he looked refreshed. He looked like a man with nothing to hide. He kissed the top of her head, poured himself a coffee, and leaned against the counter, crossing his ankles. "You're up early," he noted. "Did the wind keep you up?" Clara looked at him. This was the moment. The fork in the road. She could ask. She could say, "I saw a text. Who is the landlord? Why are you paying rent when you live here?" But she looked at his face, open, handsome, smiling. And then she looked at the alternative, the fight. The accusation. The possibility that she was wrong and would look paranoid. The possibility that she was right and her safe harbor would dissolve. "I couldn't sleep," she said. And then, because the lie felt too heavy to carry alone, she dropped a pebble. I saw your phone light up last night. A text came through." Elias didn't freeze. He didn't drop his mug. He took a sip of coffee, unbothered. "Oh? Probably the storage facility," he said easily. "I have it set to autopay for the unit where I'm keeping my mom's antique furniture, but their system is archaic. They text me every month like clockwork to remind me the payment is pending. It's annoying. I should block the number." The storage unit. Of course. He had mentioned, months ago, in passing, that his mother had downsized and he was holding onto her dining set. It made perfect sense. It fit the data points. Clara felt a physical rush of relief so potent it made her dizzy. It wasn't a lie. It was logistics. "Oh," she said, letting out a breath. "That makes sense. It just said landlord, so I was confused." Elias paused. Just for a fraction of a second. A micro-adjustment of his expression. "Yeah, I save it under landlord, because that's how I think of it. It's the rent for the junk I can't get rid of." He chuckled, a warm, self-deprecating sound. "Why? Did you think I had a secret apartment on the side? A bachelor pad where I escape to play video games?" He teased her. He invited her to laugh at her own suspicion. "No," Clara lied, forcing a smile. I don't know. My brain is foggy." Elias walked over and wrapped his arms around her waist. He pulled her close. "You're exhausted, Clara. You're working too hard on the cathedral. It's making you jump at shadows. You know I'm an open book, right? You can look at my phone whenever you want." He gestured vaguely toward the living room where his phone lay. He offered it. And because he offered it, she didn't need to look. "I know," she said into his chest. "Good," he kissed her forehead. "Now, go get dressed. You have a meeting with the structural engineers, and you need to look like the terrifying genius you are." She went to get dressed. She felt silly. She felt grateful. She didn't know that she had just passed another test. She had noticed a crack, and he had simply painted over it with a plausible explanation. And she had thanked him for the paint. This was the beginning of the memory war. It wasn't a war fought with guns or shouting matches. It was a war of attrition, fought on the battlefield of Clara's perception. The goal wasn't to defeat her, the goal was to replace her reality with his. It happened slowly. It happened in the gaps between conversations. It began with the weaponization of her own words. Elias had a memory like a steel trap, but he used it selectively. He remembered every vulnerability she had ever confessed in the dark, and he began to bring them into the light, not to heal them, but to use them as navigational markers for her behavior. One evening, Clara came home frustrated. The lead mason on the site had undermined her authority in front of the client. She was pacing the living room, ranting. He actually interrupted me to explain the tensile strength of the stone, Clara said, throwing her hands up. To me. I wrote the thesis on that stone. I wanted to scream. Elias sat on the sofa, watching her. He wasn't nodding in agreement today. He looked concerned. Pitying. Clara, he said softly. Come sit down. I don't want to sit down. I'm angry. I know you're angry. But, do you think you might be overreacting a little? Clara stopped pacing. Overreacting? He humiliated me. Did he? Elias tilted his head. Or did he just offer a suggestion? You told me once that your father used to correct you at the dinner table. That he made you feel small whenever you spoke up. Clara froze. She had told him that. Once. Late at night, after 3 glasses of wine. What does my father have to do with this? I think, Elias said, his voice dripping with gentle, clinical insight, that you're projecting your father onto this Mason. You're hearing criticism as an attack because that's your trauma response. You said you wanted to work on that, remember? You said you wanted to stop being so defensive. Clara blinked. The anger in her chest faltered. Was she projecting? Was she being the scared little girl at the dinner table? I don't think so. He was genuinely rude. Maybe, Elias conceded. But look at you. You're shaking. You're spiraling. Is this about the Mason, or is this about your need for absolute control to feel safe? We talked about this. He framed it as a joint project. Her mental health was a team sport, and he was the coach. Clara sat down. The righteous anger drained out of her, replaced by shame. He was right. She was shaking. She did have issues with control. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to spiral. Sure, he pulled her into a hug. Don't apologize. Just be aware. I'm here to remind you when the old patterns show up. I'm your mirror, Clara. I'm the only one who tells you the truth. She leaned into him. She felt understood. She didn't realize that by accepting his diagnosis, she had just given him the power to invalidate her feelings whenever they became inconvenient. Anytime she was angry, she was projecting. Anytime she had a boundary, she was being rigid. Anytime she questioned him, she was struggling with trust issues. He had built a cage out of her own therapy. Then came the financial creep. It wasn't a robbery, it was a merger. The issue with his accounts remained complicated. There were lawyers involved now, he said. A forensic audit. It was boring, he insisted, and he didn't want to bore her with the details. But the result was that he was cash poor and asset rich, in theory. It's ridiculous, he said one night, staring at his laptop. I have a portfolio worth 6 figures sitting there, and I can't buy a flight to visit my mom because the fraud alert flagged my credit card. Do you need to go see her? Clara asked immediately. I should. She's having that surgery on her hip. But I can't ask you to pay for my flights, Clara. You've done too much. Elias, it's a flight. It's fine. Use my card. No, he said firmly. I have my pride. But, maybe there's a smarter way to do this. A logistical solution. What do you mean? We're spending so much on fees transferring money back and forth. You pay for groceries, I pay you back in cash. I pay for dinner, you Venmo me. It's inefficient. And you know how much I hate inefficiency. He smiled. It was the smile from the coffee machine. The one that said, I can fix this. Why don't we just open a joint operating account, he suggested. Just for household expenses. Groceries, utilities, trips. I'll deposit my cash into it, since the bank won't let me use electronic transfers yet, and you can transfer your share. We both get a card. It streamlines everything. It made sense. It was logical. And, he added, it would help me rebuild my credit score quickly once the fraud clears, having my name on a shared asset with someone who has impeccable credit like you. He made it sound like she was doing him a favor. Like she was the strong one, lifting him up. Okay, Clara said. That makes sense. They went to the bank the next day. Clara watched him charm the teller. He was charismatic, funny, organized. He had all his paperwork, his passport, his ID. When the account was open, he handed her the debit card with a flourish. Partner, he said. Partner, she echoed. She didn't check the account activity often. Why would she? It was just for groceries. She didn't notice that the cash deposits he made were sporadic. She didn't notice that the household expenses began to include gas fill-ups at stations across town she never visited. She didn't notice because noticing felt like mistrust, and mistrust was a symptom of her trauma. And then came the silence. The first undeniable crack. The moment the ground shook. It was a Tuesday in November. A bleak, rainy day. Clara was at the cathedral site. She was up on the scaffolding, inspecting the water damage in the belfry. It was high up, windy, and isolated. She slipped. It wasn't a tragic fall. She didn't plummet to her death. But her boot caught on a loose plank, and she went down hard, twisting her ankle with a sickening crack and slamming her head against a support beam. She lay there for a moment, stunned, the world spinning. Pain radiated from her ankle in white-hot waves. She was dizzy. Concussed, maybe. She was alone. The crew had gone for lunch. She fumbled for her phone. Her fingers were shaking. She couldn't walk. The elevator lift was on the other side of the roof. She called Elias. He was her emergency contact. He was her person. He always answered. The phone rang. And rang. And rang. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. Panic started to set in. The cold rain was soaking through her jacket. She felt nauseous. She texted him, emergency. Fell at sight. Hurt. Please pick up. She waited. 1 minute. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. She stared at the screen. He knew her schedule. He knew she was at the site. He was supposed to be working from home today, from her home. Why wasn't he answering? 20 minutes passed. The pain was getting worse. She finally swallowed her pride and called the site foreman, who was down in the trailer. Jim, she slurred slightly. I'm stuck in the belfry. I think I broke my ankle. Jim was there in 5 minutes. He and 2 other guys helped her down. They were kind, worried. They called an ambulance. Clara sat in the back of the ambulance, shivering. She checked her phone again. 45 minutes since her text. Read. He had read it. The little read receipt was there, mocking her. He had read emergency. Hurt. And he hadn't called. The ride to the hospital was a blur of misery. She felt small. She felt abandoned. The silence from his end was louder than the siren. She was in the ER, getting x-rays, when her phone finally buzzed. 2 hours later. Call incoming, Elias. She answered, her voice trembling with a mix of pain and fury. Where were you? She demanded. I've been in the hospital for an hour. I texted you. Clara? His voice was calm. Confused. I just saw your text. I'm grabbing my keys. Which hospital? I texted you 2 hours ago. It says read. You saw it and you ignored me. Whoa, slow down, Elias said, his tone shifting to that protective, managing register. I didn't ignore you. I was in a meeting with the lawyers. My phone was on the table, face up. The screen probably lit up and registered as read because I touched it to check the time, but I didn't actually see the message until just now. I was fighting for my financial life, Clara. I'm in the emergency room. Clara cried, ignoring the stares of a nurse. I was alone on a roof in the rain. I know, baby, I know. And I'm coming. I'm coming right now. Don't be angry at me for a technical glitch. You know I would never ignore you. You know that. He sounded so sincere. So frantic. Clara closed her eyes. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted. "Just come," she whispered. When he arrived, he was perfect. He brought her a change of clothes. He brought her favorite juice. He charmed the nurses to get her discharged faster. He carried her to the car. But on the ride home, the silence lingered. Clara looked out the window. She replayed the timeline. "Read. 2 hours. I really didn't see it," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "I would have burned the city down to get to you if I knew." "I felt really alone," Clara admitted. "I know. And I hate that. But don't let your fear turn me into the bad guy. I'm the guy who is here now. I'm the guy driving you home." He was right. He was here. But for the first time, Clara felt a chill that the car heater couldn't fix. The explanation was logical. But her gut, that primitive, structural engineer part of her brain that understood load-bearing limits, was screaming that the math didn't add up. She pushed the voice down. She had a concussion. She was emotional. She was projecting. The recovery from the ankle injury meant she was stuck at home for 2 weeks. Immobilized. Dependent. This was when the isolation cemented itself. She couldn't drive. She couldn't go to the site. She relied on Elias for everything. For food. For ice packs. For company. He was wonderful. He waited on her hand and foot. But he also controlled the flow of information. When Maya texted to ask how she was, Elias picked up Clara's phone. "I'll answer for you," he said. "Rest your eyes." Clara heard him typing. "What did you say?" "Just that you're resting and not up for visitors yet. You don't want Maya coming over here and making a scene, do you? Being loud? You need quiet." I guess." He was gatekeeping her recovery. And it felt like care. But then came the gaslighting. The memory war entered its active combat phase. It was a small thing. A detail. They were eating dinner on the couch. "My mom called today," Elias said casually. "She asked if we're still coming for Christmas." Clara paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Christmas?" she asked. "Elias, I told you I have to work Christmas week. The cathedral deadline is January 1st. We talked about this. I said we could go in February." Elias looked at her. He didn't look angry. He looked confused. He looked worried. "Clara," he said slowly. "We booked the tickets last week. Remember? We sat right here. You said you'd ask Jim to cover the site for 3 days. You were so excited to meet her." Clara stared at him. Her mind raced backward. She remembered talking about his mom. She remembered him asking about Christmas. But she distinctly remembered saying no. She remembered the guilt of saying no. "No," she said firmly. "I remember saying no. I remember telling you Jim is in Florida for Christmas. I can't leave the site." Elias put his plate down. He turned his body toward her. He looked at her with a profound, terrifying sadness. "Honey," he said softly. "The concussion. The doctor said memory loss could be a side effect." "I don't have amnesia, Elias. I know what I said." "Okay," he put his hands up in a surrender gesture. "Okay. You're right. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I wanted it so bad I hallucinated it." He stood up and walked to the window. His shoulders slumped. He looked like a kicked puppy. "I told my mom you were coming. She bought a new tablecloth. She was baking." Clara felt her stomach twist. The guilt. The weaponized guilt. "I didn't book tickets," she said, checking her mental inventory. "I would have seen the charge." "I booked them," Elias said quietly, without turning around. "With the joint account. I wanted to surprise you by handling the logistics." Clara opened her banking app. Her hands were shaking. She scrolled. There it was. Airline, $800. 5 days ago. She stared at the screen. 5 days ago? She was on the couch with her ankle elevated. They had watched a movie. Had they talked about it? Had she agreed and forgotten? The doctor had said she might be foggy. She had been taking heavy painkillers. Was it possible? Was she losing time? Clara's voice trembled. I don't remember agreeing to it. Elias turned around. He walked back to her and knelt by the couch. He took her hands. It's the painkillers, Clara. It's okay. It's scary, I know. But you did agree. You were happy about it. You smiled. He looked so sure. So steady. And she was so broken. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. I feel like I'm going crazy. You're not crazy, he soothed, stroking her hair. You're just tired. You're hurt. That's why I'm here. I'll remember for both of us. I'll remember for both of us. It sounded like a promise. It was actually a threat. He was taking ownership of her history. He was editing her timeline. Clara went to Christmas. She met his mother, a frail, anxious woman who seemed afraid of her own son, though Clara interpreted it as shyness. She smiled. She played the part. But inside, a cold seed of terror had taken root. She didn't trust her memory anymore. If she could forget agreeing to a trip, what else had she forgotten? She began writing things down. Secretly. In a small notebook she kept hidden in her tampon box in the bathroom, the one place she knew he wouldn't look. Tuesday, he said he would be home at 6 but he came home at 9 then said he never said 6. Friday, money got missing from the joint account. He said he bought groceries but the fridge is empty. She was collecting evidence against her own insanity. But the evidence was confusing. Sometimes he was right. Sometimes she had forgotten a detail. And every time she was wrong, it reinforced his narrative. See? You're fragile. You need me. The isolation was no longer about physical distance. It was about reality distance. She lived on planet Elias, and the gravity there was different. One night, late in January, the breaking point of part 3 arrived. Not with a shout, but with a whisper. Clara was working on her laptop. She was trying to access an old email folder to find a contract from before Elias. She typed in her password. Incorrect password. She frowned. She typed it again. Architecture 123. Incorrect password. She tried her backup. Incorrect password. A cold dread pooled in her stomach. She clicked forgot password. Asterisk recovery code sent to ending in *88. That wasn't her phone number. Her number ended in 42. 88 was Elias's number. She sat there, staring at the screen. The cursor blinked. 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 He had changed her password. And he had changed the recovery number to his own. She didn't confront him. Not immediately. The fear was too sharp. She realized, with a clarity that cut through the fog of gaslighting and painkillers, that this wasn't about efficiency. This wasn't about protection. He had locked the gates. And she was on the inside. She stood up and walked to the bedroom door. Elias was sleeping. He looked peaceful. The man who made her soup. The man who saved her files. The man who held her hair back when she was sick. He had her passwords. He had her money. He had her confidence. And for the first time, Clara realized she didn't just love him. She was afraid of him. She went back to the living room, opened her secret notebook, and wrote a single sentence. The handwriting was shaky, but the ink was dark. He is stealing my life. She closed the book. She hid it. And then she went back to bed, lying next to the enemy, waiting for the sun to rise on a world she no longer recognized. The most terrifying sound in the world is not a scream. It is the sound of a key turning in the lock when you no longer know who is walking through the door. For Clara, the apartment had transformed. It was no longer the glass fortress she had built to keep the world out. It was a panopticon, a prison where she felt watched even when the room was empty. After the discovery of the changed passwords and the recovery number that ended in 88, Clara stopped living. She started performing. She woke up every morning and put on the costume of the happy, trusting partner. She kissed Elias goodbye when he left for work. She texted him heart emojis. She cooked dinner. But inside, behind the eyes that smiled too brightly, she was screaming. She was a ghost haunting her own life, observing the machinery of her destruction from a distance. She kept the notebook hidden. It moved from the tampon box to the inside of her winter boots, then to the lining of an old purse she never used. It was the only physical evidence that she was still sane. Monday, he said he was at the gym. His shirt is dry. He smells like cigarette smoke. He doesn't smoke. Wednesday, $200 withdrawal from the joint account. Memo says groceries. The fridge is still empty. She was collecting data. She was the architect surveying the damage before declaring the building condemned. But she needed more than suspicion. She needed structural proof. And to get that, she had to leave the cage. The opportunity came on a Thursday. Elias texted her at 10 a.m. Meeting ran long. Going to be stuck at the warehouse until late. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. It was a standard text. A few months ago, she would have felt sympathy for his long hours. Now, she felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp it made her hands shake. She waited 30 minutes to be safe. Then, she called in sick to the architecture firm. She didn't go to the doctor. She didn't go to the site. She went to the public library 3 blocks away. It was a neutral zone. A place with computers that Elias hadn't touched, with IP addresses he couldn't track. She sat at a terminal in the back corner, surrounded by students and homeless men sleeping in chairs. The fluorescent lights hummed. It was the unglamorous command center of her rebellion. She started with the bank. Since she couldn't log into her own account because of the password change, she called the fraud department directly. She had her passport, her social security number, her mother's maiden name. She was ready to fight. I'm locked out of my account, she whispered into her phone, hunched over the desk. My password was changed without my authorization. The representative was calm, bureaucratic. I see the change was made on January 15th via the mobile app. Was that you, Bull? No, Clara said. It wasn't. Okay. We can reset it. I'll need to send a verification code to the number on file ending in 88. No. Clara's voice rose, and a librarian shushed her. She lowered her voice to a frantic hiss. That is not my number. That is the hacker's number. You need to remove it. It took 45 minutes of security questions. 45 minutes of proving she was who she said she was. When she finally gained access, she logged in on the library computer. The screen loaded. The numbers populated. Clara stopped breathing. The main savings account, the one she had been building for 10 years, the Cathedral Fund, was gone. Not just low. Gone. Balance, $42.15. She stared at the number. It didn't look real. It looked like a glitch. She clicked on the transaction history. Transfer to eThorn, legal fees, $5,000. Transfer to eThorn, medical, $3,000. Cash withdrawal, $800. Cash withdrawal, $800. Cash withdrawal, $800. Page after page. A hemorrhage of wealth. He hadn't just taken money for the joint expenses. He had been siphoning her life savings for months. Every time he went to the bank to fix his fraud issues, he was actually withdrawing her cash. And then, a new tab. Credit cards. Clara only had one credit card, an Amex she paid off every month. But on the screen, there were 3 cards listed. Visa signature, balance, $14,500. MasterCard Gold, balance, $9,800. She clicked on them. They had been opened 4 months ago. The billing address was a P.O. box in a neighborhood across town. She felt bile rise in her throat. He had stolen her identity. The identity theft story he had sold her, the one where he was the victim, was a projection. He was the thief. He had used her social security number, which she had likely given him for a lease application or a flight booking, to open lines of credit in her name. She sat back in the hard library chair. She felt lightheaded. This wasn't just a bad boyfriend. This was a crime scene. She printed everything. The hum of the printer felt like a countdown. She shoved the papers into her bag. She had the evidence. Now she needed to know the why. And the where. She called his office. The logistics company where he claimed to be a manager. She looked up the main line on Google, not the number he had saved in her phone. "Logistics department, please," she said when the receptionist answered. "I'm looking for Elias Thorne." There was a pause. The typing of keys. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said. "We don't have an Elias Thorne in our directory." Clara gripped the phone. "He's a manager. He's been there for 6 months. Maybe check the archived files?" "I've been here for 10 years. We had an Elias Thorne work here as a temp in the mailroom about a year ago. But he was let go after 3 weeks." "A temp? In the mailroom? Why was he let go?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "I can't disclose personnel information." "Please," Clara begged. It's a family emergency." The receptionist sighed, her voice dropping. "Look, off the record? He was caught taking photos of credit card numbers from the outgoing mail. He was escorted out by security." Clara hung up. The phone felt heavy, like a brick. He didn't have a job. He hadn't had a job the entire time they were together. So where did he go every day? Where was he when he texted her about warehouse delays? She looked at the transactions again. The cash withdrawals. They were almost all from ATMs in a specific radius. A radius around a casino on the outskirts of the city. The landlord. The texts about rent being due. It wasn't an apartment. It was a bookie. Or a debt collector. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't saving his money for his sick mother. He didn't have a sick mother, or if he did, she wasn't seeing a dime of this. He was a gambler. A grifter. A parasite who had found a host with a good credit score and a savior complex. Clara walked out of the library. The sun was still shining. It felt offensive. The world looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but the ground beneath her had dissolved. She walked home. She didn't know where else to go. Her apartment, his apartment now, was the only place she had. She entered the apartment. It was empty. The silence was thick. She went to the bedroom and packed a bag. Just a small one. Essentials. Her passport. Her jewelry. The notebook. The printed bank statements. She was going to leave. She was going to go to Maya's house, apologize on her knees, and sleep on the floor. She was going to call the police. She zipped the bag. The front door opened. Clara froze. It was 2 p.m. He wasn't supposed to be back until late. "Clara?" His voice drifted down the hallway. Cheerful. Oblivious. "Baby? Are you home? I saw your location at the library. I thought maybe you took a half day." Her location. She had forgotten to turn off the tracking on her phone. The tracking they shared for safety. Clara shoved the bag under the bed. It didn't fit all the way. She kicked it further in. She stood up, smoothing her shirt, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Elias walked into the bedroom. He was holding a bouquet of flowers. Lilies. Her favorite. "There you are," he smiled. "I decided to blow off the rest of the shift. I missed you." He walked toward her. He looked at her face. He stopped. The smile didn't disappear, but it changed. It lost its warmth. It became the smile of a predator assessing a shift in the wind. "You're pale," he said. "And you're trembling." "I'm sick," Clara lied. It was the same lie she had used to get him into her life. The flu, the soup. Now she was using it to survive him. "I think it's food poisoning. I went to the library to get some fresh air, but I had to come back." Elias stared at her. His eyes drifted from her face to the floor. To the edge of the bed. To the strap of the bag sticking out. Clara saw him see it. Time stopped. Elias looked back up at her. He didn't scream. He didn't attack. He sighed. It was that heavy, disappointed sigh that made her feel small. "You were leaving," he said. "It wasn't a question." "No," Clara stammered. I was organizing the closet. For the donation bin." Elias dropped the flowers on the floor. The vase didn't break, but the thud was loud. He walked over to the bed and pulled the bag out. He unzipped it. He saw the clothes. He saw the papers. He pulled out the bank statements. Clara backed up until her legs hit the dresser. She was trapped. Elias read the papers. He was calm. He looked like he was reading a menu. "You went digging," he said softly. "After everything I've done for you. After I structured your life. After I gave you confidence. You went behind my back like a rat." "You stole my money," Clara whispered. The fear was giving way to a cold, hard anger. "You stole everything. The cathedral fund. My credit. You don't even have a job, Elias. You're a temp from the mailroom." Elias laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "A temp? Is that what they told you?" "Of course they did. They're covering their tracks because I sued them for wrongful termination. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry." "Stop it!" Clara screamed. "Stop lying. Just stop. The money is gone. You spent it at the casino." Elias's face hardened. The mask dropped completely. For the first time, Clara saw the man beneath the logistics manager. He looked tired. He looked cruel. "I spent it trying to fix us," he spat. "I'm building capital. I have a system. I was up 10 grand last week, Clara. I was going to put it all back before you even noticed. But you just couldn't trust the process. You had to meddle." "You're a gambling addict," she said. "And you're a thief." She moved toward the door. "I'm leaving. Get out of my way." Elias moved faster than she expected. He didn't hit her. He slammed his hand against the door frame, blocking her exit. "You're not going anywhere," he said. His voice was low. "Dangerous. Get out of my way, Elias." "And go where? To Maya? She hates you. I saw the texts she sent you last month, the ones I deleted. She thinks you're pathetic. She thinks you've lost your mind." "You deleted my texts." "I was protecting you. She was mocking you." He leaned in close. "Everyone mocks you, Clara. Everyone thinks you're icy and rigid and impossible to love. Everyone except me. I'm the only one who stuck around. I'm the only one who knows how broken you really are." "I wasn't broken until you got here," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Weren't you?" He sneered. "You were alone. You were eating dinner on a single plate in an empty museum. You were miserable. I gave you a life. I gave you chaos. I gave you feeling. You gave me debt. Money is temporary." He shouted, slamming his hand against the wall. Clara flinched. "I can make the money back in a night. But if you leave, if you walk out that door, you destroy everything. And for what? Because you're scared? Because you're cheap?" He was spinning the web. Trying to make her feel guilty for his theft. Trying to make her feel like she was the one ruining the relationship over a few dollars. "I'm calling the police," Clara said. Elias froze. He looked at her. He assessed the threat level. Then, his face changed again. The anger vanished, replaced by a sudden, terrifying fragility. He slumped against the doorframe. He slid down to the floor. He put his head in his hands. He started to cry. It wasn't a fake cry. It was ugly, racking sobs. "I'm sick," he wailed. "Clara, I'm sick. It's a disease. I didn't want to hurt you. I love you so much it hurts. I was trying to win it back for you. I wanted to buy you a house. I wanted to be the man you deserve." Clara stood there, watching him weep. A part of her, the part he had groomed for months, wanted to kneel down and comfort him. He looked so small. So pathetic. "I need help," he sobbed. "I need help, and you're the only person in the world who can save me." If you leave me, I'll have nothing. I'll die. I swear to God, Clara, I'll kill myself. I can't live with the shame of what I did to you. The suicide threat. The ultimate trump card. Clara stared at him. She felt nausea rolling in her gut. She knew, logically, that this was manipulation. But emotionally, she was a restoration architect. Her entire life was built on saving broken things. You stole my identity, she said, but her voice lacked the fire it had a moment ago. I know, he wept. I'll go to jail. I'll turn myself in. Just, don't leave me alone tonight. Please. I'm scared of what I'll do. Just give me one night to make it right. One night to explain. He looked up at her, eyes red and swollen. He reached out a hand. It was shaking. Please, Clara. Don't let me die like this. Clara looked at the door. It was inches away. She could step over him. She could run. But the programming was deep. The isolation was absolute. If she walked out, and he did hurt himself, that would be on her. That would be the final failure. She looked at the bag on the floor. She looked at the bank statements. One night, she whispered, you sleep on the couch. And tomorrow, we go to the police together. And you confess. Elias nodded frantically. Yes. Yes. Anything you say. Just don't leave. He crawled out of the doorway. He curled up on the rug, weeping. Clara stepped back. She didn't leave. She made the mistake that seals the tomb. She stayed. That night, she locked the bedroom door. She pushed the dresser in front of it. She slept with her phone in her hand, dialing 911 but never pressing send. She didn't know that in the living room, Elias wasn't sleeping. He wasn't weeping. He was on his phone. He was transferring the last remaining limit of her credit cards to an offshore crypto wallet. He was liquidating the assets she didn't even know she had. And he was texting the landlord. One more day. I have a solution. She's not going to be a problem much longer. The next morning, the dynamic in the apartment had shifted. It was no longer a home. It was a hostage situation. Clara came out of the bedroom, dressed in her work clothes. She had resolved to go to the police station immediately. Elias was in the kitchen. He was cooking eggs. The smell of butter and toast filled the air, sickeningly normal. I made breakfast, he said. He didn't look like the weeping man from the night before. He looked calm. Deadly calm. I'm not hungry, Clara said. Get your shoes. We're going to the station. Elias didn't move. He flipped an egg. We're not going to the station, Clara. We had a deal. Deals change. He turned off the stove. He turned to face her. He was holding the spatula, but his posture was military. I've been thinking, he said. If we go to the police, I go to jail. That's true. But you? You go to bankruptcy court. The debt is in your name, Clara. I made sure of that. Even if you prove fraud, it takes years to clear. Your security clearance for the government contracts? Gone. Your partnership? Gone. The cathedral project? They won't let a bankrupt architect with a messy legal battle manage a heritage site. Clara stared at him. He had thought this through. So here is the new deal, he said, leaning against the counter. We are going to sell this apartment. What? The market is high. You have equity. We sell the apartment. We pay off the debts, my debts, your debts. We take the leftover cash, and we move. Maybe upstate. Somewhere cheaper. We start over. You are insane, Clara said. I am never selling this apartment. This is my home. Is it? Elias looked around the room. It looks like a liability to me. And if you don't sell it, well, the creditors are going to put a loan on it anyway. I stopped paying the mortgage 4 months ago. The floor dropped out from under her. You said you were mailing the checks. You showed me the stubs. Photoshop is a wonderful tool, he smiled. 4 months, Clara. The foreclosure notice is probably in the mail pile I've been hiding in the trunk of my car. You're about to lose it anyway. So, we sell it. We take the cash. And we leave. Clara couldn't breathe. Her chest felt like it was being crushed by a slab of marble. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Why me? Elias shrugged. Because you were there. And because you have excellent credit. Or, you did. He walked over to her. She flinched, but she was too paralyzed to run. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Don't look so tragic, he said softly. I'm offering you a way out. We sell. We leave. We stay together. Because let's be honest, Clara, who else is going to want you now? You're broke. You're damaged. You're a woman who let a mailroom temp dismantle her life. You're humiliating. He leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear. I'm the only one who can stomach the mess you've become. It was the masterstroke. He stripped her of her assets, and then he stripped her of her dignity. He made her complicity in his crime the chain that bound her to him. Clara stood there. She looked at the eggs cooling on the plate. She looked at the view of the city she had worked so hard to afford. She realized then that the wrong person wasn't just a bad choice. He was a terminal diagnosis. I need to think, she said, her voice hollow. Take all day, Elias said, returning to his breakfast. I'll call the realtor. I know a guy who does quick cash sales. We can be out by the weekend. He sat down and started eating. Clara walked into the bathroom. She locked the door. She turned on the shower so he wouldn't hear her. She slid down the wall to the cold tile floor. She didn't cry. She was past crying. She reached into her bra and pulled out the notebook. She turned to a new page. She wrote, "He is not going to let me leave." She looked at the words. Then she wrote one more line. I have to stop being the architect. I have to become the demolition crew. She stood up. She looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was pale, gaunt, and terrified. But her eyes were different. The soft, hopeful light was gone. In its place was something cold. Something sharp. Something structural. She washed her face. She unlocked the door. The siege was complete. But the war? The war was just beginning. The bathroom mirror was the only witness to the resurrection. Clara stared at her reflection. The woman staring back was gaunt. Her skin was pale, her eyes rimmed with the red exhaustion of sleepless nights and shed tears. But behind the iris, deep in the pupil where the light vanished, something new had ignited. It wasn't hope. Hope is soft, hope is buoyant. This was something heavier. It was the cold, mathematical precision of a demolition expert calculating the exact angle to place the charge. She washed her face with freezing cold water. She scrubbed the tear tracks until her skin was raw. Then, she applied a layer of foundation. She put on mascara. She brushed her hair. She put on the armor of the woman Elias thought he had created, the compliant, dependent, terrified partner. She unlocked the door. Elias was still at the kitchen island, eating his eggs. He looked up as she entered. His eyes scanned her face, looking for rebellion. He found only submission. You're right, Clara said, her voice trembling just enough to sound broken. I can't lose the partnership. I can't go bankrupt. If selling the apartment is the only way to wipe the slate clean, then we sell it. Elias smiled. It was a slow, satisfied spreading of lips that didn't reach his eyes. He put down his fork. I knew you'd see sense, he said, walking over to her. He wrapped his arms around her. Clara forced her body to remain limp, yielding. We're a team, Clara. Teams make hard choices. I'll call my guy. We can have papers drawn up by tomorrow. Tomorrow? Clara asked, widening her eyes in panic. That's so fast. The place is a mess. If we want top dollar, and we need top dollar to cover the debts, I need to stage it. I need to make it look perfect. Elias hesitated. He was impatient, desperate for the cash infusion. But he was also greedy. How long? 2 days, Clara promised. Give me 2 days to pack the personal items, clean the grout, polish the floors. I'll make it look like a showroom. We can ask for $50,000 more if it shows well. $50,000. The number hung in the air. Elias did the math. He nodded. 2 days, he agreed. But I'm supervising. You don't leave the apartment without me. I don't want to leave, Clara whispered, burying her face in his chest to hide the revulsion. I'm scared to go outside. Everyone is going to know I'm a failure. Sure, he soothed, stroking her hair. Nobody knows but us. And I'll protect you. The performance had begun. For the next 48 hours, Clara cleaned. She cleaned like a woman possessed. She scrubbed baseboards. She polished the windows until the city skyline looked high definition. Elias watched her from the couch, scrolling on his phone, occasionally barking orders or offering encouragement. You missed a spot on the counter, he'd say. Thank you, she'd reply. I'll get it. She was lulling him into a sense of absolute power. She cooked his favorite meals. She asked his opinion on which boxes to pack first. She let him lecture her on the economy, on crypto, on the unfairness of the banking system. She fed his ego until it was bloated and sluggish. But while her hands were scrubbing, her mind was architectural. She was mapping the load-bearing walls of his deception. She needed an extraction point. And she needed a weapon. The weapon was in the closet. On the second day, while packing her winter coats, Clara found it. The old burner phone she had used for international travel 3 years ago. It was dead, buried in a showbox. She slipped it into her pocket. Later, while Elias was in the shower, the only 10 minutes of privacy she had, she plugged it into the USB port behind the TV, hidden by the screen. It charged. It turned on. She didn't have a SIM card, but she had Wi-Fi. And Elias, in his arrogance, hadn't changed the Wi-Fi password. Why would he? He controlled the router. She connected. Her fingers flew across the tiny, cracked screen. She didn't call the police. Not yet. The police would take a report. They would say it's a civil matter. They would take weeks. Elias would run. She needed something faster. She needed a force of nature. She emailed Maya. Subject: The cathedral is burning. Maya. I know I cut you off. I know you hate me. You were right. About everything. He is a con artist. He has stolen my identity, my money, and my home. I am being held hostage in my apartment. He thinks we are selling it on Friday to a cash buyer. I need you. I need you to be the buyer. I need you to bring David, the one who works in fraud at the DA's office. Do not reply. Just show up at 10 a.m. on Friday. Pretend to be the realtor's client. Please. I am drowning. She hit send. Then she deleted the sent mail. She wiped the history. She hid the phone back in the showbox. She walked into the bedroom just as Elias came out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist. Who were you talking to? He asked sharply. Clara froze. Had he heard her typing? I wasn't talking to anyone, she said, holding up a bottle of glass cleaner. I was singing. To myself. Elias narrowed his eyes. He walked over to her, dripping water on the floor she had just polished. He took her chin in his hand. Don't lie to me, Clara. I can smell a lie. I'm not lying, she whispered, letting tears well up. I was singing Landslide. It's sad. I'm sad, Elias. I'm losing my home. He studied her face. He saw the tears. He saw the genuine grief, because she was grieving, just not for the house. She was grieving the woman she used to be. He smirked. It's just a condo, babe. We'll get a better one. He let her go. He believed her because he believed she was broken. He couldn't imagine a version of her that fought back. The night before the sale, the atmosphere in the apartment was electric. Elias was manic. He was pacing, talking about the fresh start, about how they would move to a cabin in Vermont, maybe start a bespoke furniture business. He was spending the money he hadn't stolen yet. Clara sat on the floor, taping boxes. We need to sign the deed transfer papers before the buyer arrives, Elias said. My guy sent them over. It streamlines the process. He slapped a stack of papers on the coffee table. Sign here, here, and here. It authorizes the title company to wire the funds directly to the holding account I set up for us. Clara looked at the papers. They were crude forgeries. The title company logo was pixelated. The holding account was undoubtedly his crypto wallet. If she signed these, he didn't need her anymore. If she signed these, the money would vanish the second it hit the account, and he would disappear into the ether, leaving her with the debt and the eviction notice. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook. I can't sign this yet, she said. Elias stopped pacing. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Excuse me? I need a notary, Clara stammered. For a deed transfer, you legally need a notary present. If we sign it without one, the bank will reject the wire. You know how banks are. Especially with the fraud alerts on my name. She used his own logic against him. The bureaucracy. The rules. Elias stared at her. He ground his teeth. You're right, he spat. Damn banks. But don't worry, Clara added quickly. The buyer is bringing a notary. My dad's friend. The one buying the place? He said he travels with a notary to close deals fast. You didn't tell me the buyer was your dad's friend. I didn't. Clara feigned innocence. I thought I did. That's why he's paying cash. He's doing it as a favor to get me out of trouble. Elias's eyes lit up. A family friend meant emotion. Emotion meant sloppy due diligence. Perfect, he said. Even better. We'll sign it in the morning. Then we take the check and we run. We run, Clara agreed. She went to bed that night lying next to the man who was planning to bury her. She listened to his breathing. She imagined the air leaving his lungs. She imagined the structure of his life collapsing, beam by beam. She didn't sleep. She rehearsed. Friday morning arrived with a gray, oppressive sky. The city looked like it was made of iron. Clara dressed in her navy suit, the one Elias had told her made her look like a director. She put on her heels. She put on her watch. Why are you dressed up? Elias asked. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, casual, ready to move. Respect, Clara said. I'm selling my life. I want to look like I have dignity left. Elias chuckled. Suit yourself. Just don't say anything stupid. Let me do the talking. I'm the manager. You're the manager, she echoed. At 10 a.m. exactly, the buzzer rang. Elias checked the monitor. Who is that? He asked, frowning. Clara moved to the intercom. That's the buyer. Oh, God. Is that Maya? Maya? Elias spun around. What is she doing here? I told you to cut her off. I didn't invite her. Clara lied, injecting panic into her voice. She must have found out. She's probably here to stop me. Elias, don't let her in. I'm not letting that bitch in, Elias growled. Wait, Clara grabbed his arm. If we don't let her in, she'll make a scene in the lobby. She'll scream. The doorman will call the police. We can't have the police here today. Not with the buyer coming. Elias froze. He looked at the monitor. He looked at Clara. Fine, he hissed. Let her up. I'll handle her. But if she messes this deal up, I swear to God, Clara. He pressed the buzzer. Clara exhaled. The drawbridge was down. A minute later, the door opened. Maya stood there. She looked furious. She looked magnificent. Behind her was a man in a grey suit. Not an older family friend. A sharp, young man with a briefcase. Clara, Maya said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Elias. And, the logistician. Maya, Elias said, putting on his charming mask, though it was tight around the edges. This isn't a good time. We're in the middle of a private transaction. I heard, Maya said. Clara is selling the fortress. I had to see it to believe it. She turned to the man in the suit. This is David, Maya said. He's interested in the property. Elias looked at David. He sized him up. David looked boring. Bureaucratic. Safe. Cash buyer. Elias asked. Certified funds, David said. His voice was dry, professional. I have the cashier's check right here. But I need to see the paperwork before I hand it over. Of course, Elias said. The greed overtook the suspicion. He gestured to the coffee table. The deed transfer is ready. We just need to notarize it. I'm a notary, David said. Elias smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has won the lottery. Fantastic. Let's get this done. They sat at the dining table. The glass table Clara had bought with her first big bonus. Elias sat at the head. Clara sat to his right. David sat opposite. Maya stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. Elias slid the forged papers toward David. Standard quitclaim deed, Elias said. Transferring ownership to the trust. David picked up the papers. He put on a pair of reading glasses. He took a long time reading. The silence in the room was heavy. The ticking of the clock sounded like a bomb timer. There's a problem, David said finally. What problem? Elias demanded. It's a standard form. The social security number listed for the transferor, David said, tapping the paper. It doesn't match the owner of record. Elias stiffened. That's a typo. We can correct it. It's not a typo, David said, looking up. His eyes were no longer boring. They were sharp. It's the social security number of a deceased man from Ohio. Which is interesting, Mr. Thorne, because that's the same number you used to open the credit cards at Chase, Wells Fargo, and Amex in Clara's name. The air left the room. Elias froze. His smile twitched, then vanished. Who are you? Elias whispered. I'm David Ross, the man said. Assistant District Attorney. Fraud Division. Elias stood up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. Clara, he snarled, turning to her. What did you do? Clara didn't flinch. She didn't look down. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table. I did what you taught me, Elias, she said softly. I managed the logistics. You set me up. He screamed, lunging toward her. Maya moved. She stepped forward, blocking his path. But she didn't need to. From the hallway Elias had forgotten to lock because he was too focused on the check, two uniformed officers stepped in. Elias Thorne, one of them said. Put your hands behind your back. Elias looked at the cops. He looked at the open door. He looked at the window, 20 floors up. He looked at Clara. For a second, the mask dissolved completely. There was no charm. No anger. Just a naked, terrified realization that he was the one who had been played. Clara, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we're partners. I can fix this. I can pay it back. Clara stood up slowly. She smoothed her navy suit. She looked him in the eye. There is no we, Elias. There never was. There was just you, eating me alive. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the notebook. The little black notebook where she had documented every lie, every theft, every gaslit moment. She slid it across the table to the district attorney. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook. I can't sign this yet, she said. Elias stopped pacing. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Excuse me? I need a notary, Clara stammered. For a deed transfer, you legally need a notary present. If we sign it without one, the bank will reject the wire. You know how banks are. especially with the fraud alerts on my name. She used his own logic against him. The bureaucracy. The rules. Elias stared at her. He ground his teeth. You're right, he spat. Damn banks. But don't worry, Clara added quickly. The buyer is bringing a notary. My dad's friend. The one buying the place? He said he travels with a notary to close deals fast. You didn't tell me the buyer was your dad's friend. I didn't. Clara feigned innocence. I thought I did. That's why he's paying cash. He's doing it as a favor to get me out of trouble. Elias's eyes lit up. A family friend meant emotion. Emotion meant sloppy due diligence. Perfect, he said. Even better. We'll sign it in the morning. Then we take the check and we run. We run, Clara agreed. She went to bed that night lying next to the man who was planning to bury her. She listened to his breathing. She imagined the air leaving his lungs. She imagined the structure of his life collapsing, beam by beam. She didn't sleep. She rehearsed. Friday morning arrived with a gray, oppressive sky. The city looked like it was made of iron. Clara dressed in her navy suit, the one Elias had told her made her look like a director. She put on her heels. She put on her watch. Why are you dressed up? Elias asked. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, casual, ready to move. Respect, Clara said. I'm selling my life. I want to look like I have dignity left. Elias chuckled. Suit yourself. Just don't say anything stupid. Let me do the talking. I'm the manager. You're the manager, she echoed. At 10 a.m. exactly, the buzzer rang. Elias checked the monitor. Who is that? He asked, frowning. Clara moved to the intercom. That's the buyer. And, oh, God. Is that Maya? Maya! Elias spun around. What is she doing here? I told you to cut her off. I didn't invite her. Clara lied, injecting panic into her voice. She must have found out. She's probably here to stop me. Elias, don't let her in. I'm not letting that bitch in, Elias growled. Wait, Clara grabbed his arm. If we don't let her in, she'll make a scene in the lobby. She'll scream. The doorman will call the police. We can't have the police here today. Not with the buyer coming. Elias froze. He looked at the monitor. He looked at Clara. Fine, he hissed. Let her up. I'll handle her. But if she messes this deal up, I swear to God, Clara. He pressed the buzzer. Clara exhaled. The drawbridge was down. A minute later, the door opened. Maya stood there. She looked furious. She looked magnificent. Behind her was a man in a grey suit. Not an older family friend. A sharp, young man with a briefcase. Clara, Maya said, stepping into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on Elias. And the logistician. Maya, Elias said, putting on his charming mask, though it was tight around the edges. This isn't a good time. We're in the middle of a private transaction. I heard, Maya said. Clara is selling the fortress. I had to see it to believe it. She turned to the man in the suit. This is David, Maya said. He's interested in the property. Elias looked at David. He sized him up. David looked boring. Bureaucratic. Safe. Cash buyer. Elias asked. Certified funds, David said. His voice was dry, professional. I have the cashier's check right here. But I need to see the paperwork before I hand it over. Of course, Elias said. The greed overtook the suspicion. He gestured to the coffee table. The deed transfer is ready. We just need to notarize it. I'm a notary, David said. Elias smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has won the lottery. Fantastic. Let's get this done. They sat at the dining table. The glass table Clara had bought with her first big bonus. Elias sat at the head. Clara sat to his right. David sat opposite. Maya stood by the door, arms crossed, watching. Elias slid the forged papers toward David. Standard quitclaim deed, Elias said. Transferring ownership to the trust. David picked up the papers. He put on a pair of reading glasses. He took a long time reading. The silence in the room was heavy. The ticking of the clock sounded like a bomb timer. There's a problem, David said finally. What problem? Elias demanded. It's a standard form. The social security number listed for the transferor, David said, tapping the paper. It doesn't match the owner of record. Elias stiffened. That's a typo. We can correct it. It's not a typo, David said, looking up. His eyes were no longer boring. They were sharp. It's the social security number of a deceased man from Ohio. Which is interesting, Mr. Thorne, because that's the same number you used to open the credit cards at Chase, Wells Fargo, and Amex in Clara's name. The air left the room. Elias froze. His smile twitched, then vanished. Who are you? Elias whispered. I'm David Ross, the man said. Assistant District Attorney. Fraud Division. Elias stood up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. Clara, he snarled, turning to her. What did you do? Clara didn't flinch. She didn't look down. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table. I did what you taught me, Elias, she said softly. I managed the logistics. You set me up. He screamed, lunging toward her. Maya moved. She stepped forward, blocking his path. But she didn't need to. From the hallway Elias had forgotten to lock because he was too focused on the check, two uniformed officers stepped in. Elias Thorne, one of them said. Put your hands behind your back. Elias looked at the cops. He looked at the open door. He looked at the window, 20 floors up. He looked at Clara. For a second, the mask dissolved completely. There was no charm. No anger. Just a naked, terrified realization that he was the one who had been played. Clara, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we're partners. I can fix this. I can pay it back. Clara stood up slowly. She smoothed her navy suit. She looked him in the eye. There is no we, Elias. There never was. There was just you, eating me alive. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the notebook. The little black notebook where she had documented every lie, every theft, every gaslit moment. She slid it across the table to the district attorney. Here are the dates, she said. Here are the passwords he changed. Here are the locations of the ATMs. And here is the IP address of the crypto wallet where he is hiding my savings. Elias stared at the notebook. He looked like he had seen a ghost. You were writing it down? I'm an architect, Clara said coldly. I document the site conditions before I start the demolition. The officers grabbed him. He didn't fight. He went limp, collapsing under the weight of his own exposed reality. As they dragged him out, he didn't scream. He just stared at her. You're nothing without me, he spat as they reached the door. You're just a lonely girl in a glass tower. Clara watched him go. Better lonely, she whispered. Then infested. The door closed. The silence that followed was different than the silence of the last 6 months. It wasn't the silence of a cage. It was the silence of a ruin after the storm has passed. David, the DA, packed up his papers. We'll need a statement, he said gently. But we have enough to hold him. The crypto wallet is being frozen as we speak. We might be able to recover about 40% of what he took. 40%, Clara repeated. It wasn't everything. It wasn't even half. She was still broke. She was still in debt. The mortgage was still in default. Thank you, she said. David nodded and left. And then, there were two. Clara turned to Maya. Maya, who had stood like a sentinel by the door. Maya, who had been insulted, cut off, and deleted. Clara opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness. But words felt insufficient. Maya walked across the room. She stepped over the fallen chair. She walked right up to Clara. And she slapped her. It wasn't a hard slap. It was a stinging, sharp, wake-up call of a slap. Then, before Clara could react, Maya pulled her into a hug so fierce it cracked Clara's ribs. "You idiot," Maya sobbed into her neck. "You absolute, brilliant, stupid idiot." Clara broke. The dam she had built, the steel reinforcements she had installed, the facade she had maintained, it all shattered. She fell into Maya's arms and wailed. She cried for the money. She cried for the betrayal. She cried for the shame of being the smart girl who fell for the dumbest trick in the book. "I'm sorry," Clara choked out. "I'm so sorry." "Shut up," Maya said, holding her tighter. "Just shut up and breathe." They stayed like that for a long time. The sun moved across the floor. The dust motes danced. Eventually, they sat on the floor, leaning against the kitchen island. Clara's eyes were swollen shut. "So," Maya said, wiping her own nose. "What now? You're broke." "I'm worse than broke," Clara said. "I'm in the negative. I'm going to lose the apartment. The foreclosure is real." Clara looked around the room. The white walls. The perfect view. The glass fortress. It didn't look like safety anymore. It looked like a mausoleum. "Let it go," Clara said. "What?" "The apartment. Let them take it. It's poisoned. I can't live here. Every corner smells like his lies. I'll sell it, pay off what I can, and walk away." "And go where?" Maya asked. Clara looked at her friend. "Ideally? Your couch." Maya laughed. It was a wet, snorting laugh. "My couch is covered in dog hair and pizza boxes." "Sounds like paradise," Clara said. The aftermath wasn't a montage of easy fixes. Elias went to prison. He took a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence, admitting to 3 counts of wire fraud and identity theft. Clara didn't go to the sentencing. She sent a victim impact statement that was 2 sentences long. "He did not break me. He just showed me which parts of my foundation needed to be reinforced." The apartment was sold. The market was kind, but the debts were deep. After the bank took their share, and the credit card companies took theirs, Clara walked away with 2 suitcases and $1,200. She lost the partnership at the firm. The scandal of the bankruptcy and the distraction of the trial made her a liability. They let her go with regret. She lost the cathedral project. She lost the status. She lost the view. She lost the illusion of control. 3 months later, Clara stood on a sidewalk in a gritty part of town. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She was standing in front of an old, dilapidated brownstone. The windows were boarded up. The roof was sagging. The brickwork was crumbling. It was a wreck. "It's a disaster," Maya said, standing next to her, holding 2 coffees. "It's literally going to fall down if you sneeze." "The bones are good," Clara said. She wasn't looking at the rot. She was looking at the structure. "The foundation is stone. It's settled, but it's solid. It just needs restoration." Clara took a sip of coffee. It was cheap bodega coffee, not the artisan blend Elias used to make. It tasted bitter. It tasted real. "I got the job," Clara said. "The one with the city." "Yeah. Junior structural analyst for the parks department. It pays half of what I used to make. I'll be inspecting retaining walls and public toilets." "Glamorous," Maya grinned. "It's honest work," Clara said. "No pedestals. Just dirt and stone." She looked at the brownstone again. She wasn't the woman she was before. She would never be the naive girl who trusted a man because he brought her soup. She would never be the arrogant architect who thought she could design a life impervious to pain. She was scarred. She was cautious. Her credit score was ruined, and her heart was currently under construction. But she was standing. You know, Clara said, watching a pigeon land on the broken gutter. I used to think trust was a fortress. Something you build to keep things out. And now? Maya asked. Clara turned to her friend. She smiled. It wasn't a bright smile. It was a weathered one. Now I know trust is just knowing who will hold the flashlight while you dig through the rubble. She bumped her shoulder against Maya's. Ready to go home? Clara asked. Yeah, Maya said. My couch misses you. Clara took one last look at the broken building. She saw the cracks. She saw the flaws. She saw the work it would take to fix it. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the work. She turned around and walked away from the ruin, one step at a time, into the messy, chaotic, beautiful noise of the living world.